up, YouTube? It's Orange Beanie Guy. I'm here today with my friend Anthony.
How's it going?
My friend Mako.
Morning.
Thought we'd give podcasting another try, and I'd love to start this off with you guys. So thank you all for being here with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for
I
having
hate to be
us.
so formal about it, so please, someone in this. Make this a little less formal for the people watching. I called you all here today because I wanted to touch on a topic that might, I don't know, tug on a few people's heartstrings. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to talk about post-college and kind of what that's been like with you all,
Yeah.
me, etc.
Well, I mean, it's definitely something that a lot of people I think are asking questions on because it's the first time in our lives where like the answers aren't necessarily given to us.
Yeah.
You know, it's we're leaving the security of our homes for the first time, and or at least hopefully we're leaving our security of our homes for the first time, and it's the part where the first thing I realized once I went from like college to getting my first full-time job and then getting soon out of my house is like when you're in college you're not as independent as you think you are.
Yeah.
And you are much more dependent on your parents than what you ever thought.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, I didn't realize I was so like financially taken care of as far as like there are bills that I've taken over that I didn't even know existed. I'm paying for insurance. Don't know what the hell that's about. But in the sense, I think you can kind of take it one of two different ways. It can be overwhelming in a lot of ways, but at the same time, like it's your first. If you let yourself view yourself as some form of blank canvas, not to sound too artistic or to overthink this, but when you go from like middle school to high school, everybody thinks like, okay, I'm going to reinvent myself. I'm going to make new friends. I'm going to try new experiences because it's going to be, I'm going to be different than I was in middle school. And then you say the exact same thing when you go from high school to college. I'm going to, be involved in these kinds of clubs. I'm going to maybe join this fraternity. I'm going to take, these classes and try all these different things. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But now you're officially on your own. Yeah. Everything you're doing for yourself. You're doing because you want to. There's a lot of responsibility with that, but you have a lot of room to take that responsibility into whatever direction you decide. In
a way, you know how you're saying going from middle school to high school, it's like I'm going to be a different person. I'm going to make these friends. High school to college, same exact thing. At least for me, I felt like once I got done with college, my labels, if you will, were more or less there. It's like, okay, this is kind of the guy I am now. Like, sure, there's a ton of other things that I would like to go out and try to do, but when you get into a adulthood setting, it's kind of hard to go out and do these things. For me, it's you wake up, go to work every day, come home. I have the dog and my ferrets to take care of, along with any bills or things that I need to do to maintain the house that I'm in now. And then the day's more or less done. There's not a lot of time to go out and try other things or hell, sometimes even enjoy the things that I like to do. Fortunately, I just have a computer here and I can hop on and play video games for an hour, but it's like I can't go to a gym as often as I'd like to, or I can't go, like I used to go and kayak or take my dog to the lake every day after school, but that just can't happen anymore because you get off at like 5, 6, whenever that is. Well,
plus, you're going to fight rush hour and so it's you're lucky to get home by like 6:30 p.m. and
well, I wonder how much of that, because you were just talking about this idea of going from high school to college and having all these things, these clubs, these organizations that you can go and try. And I wonder how much of that, especially from the postgraduate standpoint, is a matter of availability and option. Because it's a lot easier when there's all these clubs presented to you at, I don't know, like a club fair at orientation, or when there's all these new people that are the exact same age as you with a lot of the same interests as you, just there, ready to make friends and meet new people. And the reality is, once you graduate, a lot of that just isn't there.
It's not as available. But I think that also, in a sense, is what makes it feel a little more conscious, because, you were in a fraternity in college, and then so you're aware that, like, a lot of things kind of get taken for granted because of availability, so you're not in a shortage of social life. You're not in a shortage of social interaction and camaraderie. Like, that's just readily available to you constantly. But all of a sudden when you leave that setting, you have to seek it out. So I think it feels more conscious and intentional as opposed to like, oh, well, this is just what I'm doing today. Or as I think at times it felt in college a little more like you were along for the ride, as opposed to actually actively going out and seeking those experiences, if that makes sense.
I think absolutely.
I was always not the. I mean, I was an RA, but I was never a fan of the like, hey, let's all get together and name our favorite color and see
Right.
what we have in common with each other. But when that's gone and you get thrust into a work environment of people that have been there way longer than you, and you're like, okay, I'm the odd guy out now, and I
Yes.
have to, attempt to make friends or at least be okay with these people. It's a bit disconcerting.
Not only do people not want to know your favorite color, they actively get mad at you if you tell them.
Right. Well, and the funny thing about that kind of an environment is the only thing I can compare it to is I remember thinking on my first day of high school, at 14, getting dropped off and seeing like students that drove themselves to school, getting out of their cars, and for whatever reason at 14 that blew my mind, because coming from grade school, middle school, like you never really gave that a thought.
Yeah.
I kind of got a similar feeling on my first day of work where some random person stopped by my desk and like was asking me about myself, and like one of her questions was whether or not I had any children.
That's
What?
so right.
What?
Thank you.
Excuse? Well,
ma'am, I've been here 5 minutes.
well, and it's and the thing is, like I think the reason why I found that so surprising was because that's a valid question now. Like it's put all of us in a setting where like you're a strange person if you're at, like, let's say I'm at a college party and I meet a girl and I ask her if she has any children.
Yeah.
You don't do that in college. But all of a sudden you're in a completely different environment where like I've met people that have, they've been buying houses recently, they've been getting married recently. One of my coworkers just had a child. 2 of my coworkers just had children within the last month, and they're currently on leave for that.
That's crazy.
This is we've been thrust in a part of our lives where like it's now up to us to become adults. We're now up to us to grow up.
Which is scary. It's a little bit scary because, at least in my sense, I've always pictured myself as I don't know, more, I won't say more kid-friendly, but it's like, I play video games, I'm a total geek, like, no live action stuff, I'm like all into animation and that kind of thing, and then I'm thrust into like, I'm about to turn 23, and it's like, it's about time to, grow up a little bit, and not in the sense that I have to drop all the things that I enjoy, but at the same time, I need to adjust to my new environment. And it's finding out how to do that, which is difficult.
Well,
because I've been in this house for now, but we're recording in a house I bought when I got out of college. I moved in around March. There are so many things that need to get done once you buy a house. Like, you don't think it. Like, when I thought I first bought this, I had family coming over here every week, and I was like, this is kind of nice, or help me get set up, and as soon as they leave, I can just hang out in my house. There's a lot of fucking shit that goes on a day-to-day basis where the day goes. Like, you get home from work, and you're like, oh, fuck, I gotta do, gotta cut the yard, I gotta, take care of the leak that just popped up, bills, etc. It's a lot to take in.
There's no other person to assume that responsibility. It's you have final say. It's an awesome thing because you can say this is my house.
Yes.
And whatever you want to have happen in this house, like, is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But as you're saying, like, if the walls get scuffed up, like, that's your job to repaint it. Whenever the grass needs to be cut, it's yours to cut.
Mm-hmm.
Or to figure out like who is going to cut it if you want to pay somebody to do it.
Yeah.
But
a lot of decision making, a lot more decisions that are thrust upon you that need to be. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I think so much of that responsibility that you just mentioned ties in so well with what you just described as far as enjoying the things you love, whether that's playing video games or watching animations or enjoying these components that a lot of us consider childish.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, I believe so many of us have such a strong draw to these elements of nostalgia that as much as we want to grow up, as much as we want to work the 9 to 5 and drive a new car and buy a house, which props.
And there is a lot of freedom to that.
And there's a lot of freedom to that, but with all that responsibility also comes this desire to go to a point where you didn't have to worry about that. You didn't have to worry about house payments or car payments or insurance payments. You could just come home from whatever your day was, whether that was school or some high school job, and you could come home and enjoy video games or a TV show or a favorite book. These elements of nostalgia really is the best word for it. Still have such a strong draw. And I think a lot of people realize that when you I'm in advertising, I watch a lot of ads. And if you watch any of the ads that are coming out today, a lot of them, even with TV and with like Netflix originals, Stranger Things,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the reason that was so successful was because it did a brilliant job showcasing this idea that there's these elements, there's these components, there's these things that we remember when a time when things were easier, when things were simpler, when things were kinder, when they were nicer, when it just wasn't so intense, it wasn't so real. And I think a lot of that, in its own way, reflects on our own lives when we do things like play a video game, or if we see a favorite TV show. The Mr. Rogers movie just came out a few days ago, and I think that's a big smack in the face with just, oh, remember your childhood? Hope you miss it. Like,
Well, and
that's my take on it. Anyways.
well, no, and it's definitely a strange time because but before we got started, me and him briefly talked about The Great Gatsby, and I think that's one of the maybe one of the most relevant stories to our lives currently because there's that great. It's got one of my favorite like finishing lines in all of literature. That where boats against the current borne back ceaselessly into the past or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably misquoting that, but the whole idea is if you let the past consume you, and if you let yourself miss the past too much, then you're going to find yourself constantly trying to recreate something that can never be captured again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, and it's super easy, especially for people who, didn't have to struggle for much growing up, and who were taken care of by parents that worked hard their whole lives to create a safe and stable lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine where that came from, but it's given us a chance to kind of appreciate, well, like you said, you still hold on to like the animations and the video games, and like that's still a part of your life that you can still really enjoy as you're also like buying a house, and juggling a new job and everything that's gone along with that. But you still kind of embrace that forward progression, if that makes sense.
Well, and in a way, it's weird because we were talking about nostalgia and everything. I find, at least me personally now in a more adult setting, I find a craving to pursue and succeed at something that I don't find at work. My work consists of me being at a computer all day, and when I get done from work, whatever, collecting money or whatever the case, I get home and play video games. It's like, well, I do get a little bit of a feeling of like, hey, like I'm blank right in Overwatch, or hey, I had a good game, but like it feels like there's something there that college provided that I haven't been able to find yet. I think I may have stumbled upon trying to get back into the gym lately, because being able to see your progress when it comes to weights I found more satisfying. But even though I bitched, and we all bitched about our classes at college, I think those classes had something to them. Like, even if we bitched and moaned about whatever subject it was, I think the completion of whatever project at hand filled some sort of hole that I need to find and fill.
It's an objective.
Yeah.
I think that's, when you're in college, you go to classes, and ultimately you know that that's because you're working towards a degree, which is good and well. But when you're at work, realistically, you're working for a promotion or a new position that you might not necessarily see right away.
Mm-hmm.
You're just kind of going to work, you're going through the motions, you're going through your routines. To what end? To what purpose?
To a paycheck.
Well, and I think that's why I think it's really important that everybody's going to find meaning in something different, and everybody is going to define that differently. I think because different things are important to different people.
Right.
So I think once you're on your own and making these lifestyle choices for yourself, I think it's really important to. It doesn't necessarily matter within reason what direction you pick, but you have to pick something. Mm-hmm. I think. Not to go into like the economics of a college degree too much, but one of the first things I noticed once I got my degree, no. Fortunately, I didn't have to mess with that too much, but it is a significant thing to get the degree, but it doesn't matter as much as you think it does.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm definitely not one of those people that says don't go to college, it's a waste of time. It's not. I certainly couldn't be doing the job that I have now without one. Mm-hmm. No, not even a question. but people with college degrees, you know, it's not like it used to be where like that meant you were this super well educated, like elite kind of a person. People with degrees are a dime a dozen. Everybody's got a degree now, you know, and so like going into an interview or going into any kind of interaction saying like I have a degree,
It's just a box from the check.
it is, you know, and it's really not much more than that. So I think a big thing that you can start doing once you graduate, and it doesn't necessarily matter what it is, but work towards some kind of a goal that is either going to make you stand out professionally, or is something that you don't believe most people would even attempt to try. Just because I think that's going to give you, if and when you reach that goal, it's going to give you a sense of self-confidence and self-worth that like, you know, just finishing your degree, just getting like the first job that hires you, and then showing up 9 to 5, no questions asked, and going home and disappearing for the rest of the day. I think you've got to be, you know, because the journey's not over, you know, once you're done with college. Like it's very brief. You can enjoy that very briefly. But now it's time to figure out what's next. And as soon as you start figuring out or deciding, I don't want to say figuring out, which direction you want to start pushing yourself, I think that's how you can separate yourself in the pack a little bit as you're coming out of that crowd with, you know, thousands of millions of other people that also have college degrees.
Let me ask you guys this then. As far as wanting to advance either professionally or within your range of interests, how much does this sense of nostalgia that we just talked about, how much does that hold you back or inhibit you from reaching new goals, new heights? So as much as you want to enjoy a hobby or activity that you do enjoy, that you feel gives you at least some sense of worth, how much does that detract from what you're ultimately trying to accomplish, or this idea of growing up that we've talked about?
Yeah, I think pardon me, I think you have to be careful with that, because I do think it is a threat to wanting to push yourself. Because I think a lot of times we use nostalgia and things we enjoyed as a kid in whatever form, we use that as a form of escape, but we can't let that become an escape from responsibility, from the things that we know we need to do. Where it can quickly become like, I don't feel like doing this, so I'm going to do this instead. And it's because that feels safe and it feels comfortable. It doesn't necessarily feel good, but it definitely doesn't feel bad either. I think that makes you a little more apprehensive and even a little bit tentative to push yourself away from that into something else. Because we've got a perfect example right here. You can carry that with you. But you definitely can't fall back into it for too long.
I find it in a way as you basically hit the nail on the head, everything I wanted to say, but let me provide an example. Whereas the objective for me now has become Overwatch. It's what I do. Every time I get home, all my friends on there. And they have a ranking system, essentially being like, it's like, how good are you? Are you a bronze? Are you silver? Or are you a grandmaster? Or something along those lines. And that has become my sorry.
No.
It goes bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, master, grandmaster, I think, and I'm floating in platinum, and it's become my.
I'm a grandmaster lawnmower is what I'm becoming.
He's prestiged at lowing them on.
Yeah, lowing them on.
Lowing them on.
No, but that
What the hell's in this coffee?
that's become my goal. Has been like I see those numbers and I'm like, I want those to climb, because that has become my reason to, or it's not my reason, but it's been my thing of like, it's what's, I don't know, that's my pedestal.
Sure.
I look at that number, I'm like, that's where I'm at. But I could also, in the same sense, I've been wanting to go back and start studying Japanese again. It was a course I took in college. I took extensive courses in college, but my university took away that major, so I couldn't pursue it, and I've more or less forgotten everything. But I really enjoy it. Sitting down in front of the book, I have no issues with. I don't see it as schoolwork. I genuinely enjoy the language. But then I have that, which I want to pursue, this knowledge of learning Japanese again, and then I have the numbers in Overwatch that kind of pull me back, because it's like, oh, I can study Japanese, but my numbers and like my plateau, my stand, whatever you want to call it, still sits there.
Yeah.
And I want to fight getting it up. And I'm not saying Overwatch has become an addiction or anything, but I think definitely those numbers that I see every day when I log on have played an effect of where I view myself. And I'm trying to pull away from that so that I can pursue more things like Japanese or whatever other hobbies I want to do, because sure, that's a number. There's a small community following that, and I could show that to a certain number of people and be like, hey, look, like, I'm this, and I can relate with those people, and we can talk about that. But there's a lot of things in the real world that are a little bit more impressive, and in the long run are going to be better for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to drop Overwatch completely, but I need to wean away from it in a sense so that I can actually pursue something that's, I don't know, a little bit more substantial.
I think it's important to have hobbies like that, you know,
Right.
but you know, because it is a good stress reliever. You know, like I recently got finished playing through God of War, and for the better part of like probably you know, a month and a half to 2 months, you know, I'd get home from work and for like an hour or something, like I'd play God of War, and it was like a chance to kind of like, you know, decompress for like an hour, like to not think about anything else, and then once I was done with that, you know, I'd move on to whatever else I needed to do that day. But I think another element of what you're saying with Overwatch is it definitely gives you a sense of meaning because you're accomplished like within the context of that community. Something that I learned very quickly when I started this new job is how little I actually know about the field that I'm pursuing. You know, so like on my first day, I was fresh off of, you know, passing some of the credentialing exams and was feeling really good about myself and really, frankly, overconfident about my abilities. And then I show up to the office on my first day of work, and it was like, oh my God. It was humbling.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden in an office of 250 people, I'm easily the most useless person there at the time. You know, that's like how big the setback was. And that was tough. You know, so
that feeling of helplessness or a feeling of not, you know, being below. Was it the feeling of just being new? Was it the feeling of being at the bottom of the totem pole? What exactly?
Well, I'm not really afraid of either of those. I'm not necessarily afraid of being bottom of the totem pole because like I've been there in different organizations before, and then I worked my way out of it. I'm not really afraid of being new because I'm a fairly talkative and social person, so like I'm not the kind of guy that's going to stay new for very long. And that's, you know, now 4 months in, that's proven to be true.
Yeah.
For me, it was more so like, I would say one of my biggest personal faults is like I do have a bit of an ego problem. You know, I tend to value my intelligence maybe too much sometimes. Tend to think I'm maybe a little smarter than I actually am. And then all of a sudden I'm thrown into an environment where not only is everybody easily as smart as I am, but they're also way more experienced. And so the thing that I'm studying and the thing that I thought I knew pretty well, I realized I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that I think most people our age go through when we land our first like career facing job. You know, that's not like you know, working at the store down the street in high school or whatever it is that we all did.
I think everyone has a dream of jumping into that ideal job right out of college.
Well, I think so, and I think honestly a bit. You know, I don't want to be a self-deprecating millennial or anything like that, but I do think a very real criticism of our generation is I think we value our worth a little bit like more generously, way more generously than what we're actually worth. One of the best ways I've heard it put is there are a lot of people our age that like, you know, want to step out of college and be CEO. You know, and I don't think it was necessarily that radical for me, but I definitely know people like that. I know a lot of people our age like that.
Somewhere there's a baby boomer crying tears of joy.
Well, you know, and like I said, I don't want to, you know, because I think there's a lot that our generation and age range has going for ourselves really well.
Yeah.
But I definitely think there's a lot to criticize.
I think that initial job of kind of putting you in your place needs to happen.
Sure.
Like, I don't want to jump out and be a CEO right away because, not like you were saying, like you jumped in your job and
You
you're
don't
like,
know
I don't know anything.
You don't know anything.
You need to start out, and as you're saying, it's very humbling, but I think that needs to happen for you to grow in any position.
Well, I think that's definitely part of it, and I think the other key component of that is the social media atmosphere that we've grown up with. Because every single day you go through your timeline and all you see is a comparison of where you are with your life versus where everyone else is with their life.
Right.
So you just bought this wonderful new house, but somewhere there's someone who just bought an even nicer house. Or we have a friend who's engaged, about to be married, and they're going to have a wonderful wedding, but all of a sudden there's someone else somewhere who's having an even more picturesque wedding.
Sure.
And all of a sudden this idea of self-worth isn't necessarily what makes you happy, what makes you feel validated. It's, am I validated compared to the Joneses? It's the proverbial Joneses.
It's numbers. And like I said the same thing with Overwatch. It's like you get on Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, whatever, you scroll down to the bottom of the picture or the post or whatever it is, it's like, how many upvotes, how many reblogs, how many likes am I getting on this?
Yeah.
And I genuinely, even on social media, which I tend to stray away from for the most part, it affects you in a way. And at least for me, I've gone through and I've looked at the people I followed and it's like, I don't know who the hell these fuckers are. It's like, why am I following these? And I've been just trying to like slowly cleanse that Instagram for that exact reason. Like I used to follow like a whole bunch. There's very few people like in an area, let's say hunting. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over my words.
No.
There's big hunters that I really enjoy following, but I followed so many of them and I saw all the excursions, I saw their log cabins, I saw everything. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. But then I was like, I shouldn't follow all these. Like in a way, it's like I have like my one or two guys that I look up to in a way, but I need to get rid of the rest of these because seeing all these fantastic things in a way I think's bad for me.
Well, that's definitely part of it. And then the other part of it is, as far as role models or inspirational characters that we've had to look up to, our generation grew up looking at Mark Zuckerberg as a successful CEO, which he is, but our whole generation grew up on this idea that you can wear a jacket and a t-shirt to work and be successful, or you can wear a t-shirt with a blazer and walk into a meeting because you're some venture capitalist.
Or that you can get rich overnight.
Or that you could get rich
overnight. Well, honestly, any of the tech billionaires, because a big problem with sensationalizing that in the media is basically it creates a false sense of abundance, I think, because the fact that we hear so much about these people makes us think that it's like more realistic or happens more often than it actually does. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's easy to kind of debunk that idea because we know all of their names. Mm-hmm. I think anytime in a country as big as ours, anytime we can basically list all of the people of any kind of group, like it's not a very big group.
Yeah.
But I think what you're talking about really brings us into a transition into something else I really wanted to talk about, was the idea of motivation. Mm-hmm. I think a big mistake that a lot of people make with motivation is turning to social media because as you're saying, you're looking to all these people that are supposedly having a very filtered, successful life. And I say filtered because like it's a picture. Yeah. Who knows who took the picture, where the picture was actually taken. Anybody can post a picture of anything. It doesn't mean anything. But I think something important to develop within yourself is the ability to be internally motivated. To be motivated. That's not just, waking up to a YouTube video or a song helps, but I don't think that's motivation in and of itself. Like I in my career, I still have to study a lot to continue to pass credentialization exams and continue to further myself within the career. Some days I feel like studying, some days I don't. But what I tried to do to kind of develop more consistency with it and less like, I'm motivated to study, so I'm going to sit here for 4 hours and knock out like a huge chunk of material. On the days that I knew I didn't feel like studying, I forced myself to do it. On the days that I really felt like studying, I wouldn't study right away. What I would do is I would maybe run some errands, do some other things that I knew I needed to get done. And then a few hours later, when that initial like impulsive motivation kind of died down, that's when I would study. Because I didn't want, I don't want to only get things done when I feel like it. Mm-hmm. I don't want to only try to accomplish things when I'm feeling that spark of motivation. I don't want to be impulsive about it. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to do it because I know I have to do it, and that's the only question. Joe Rogan put it beautifully in one of his recent podcasts where he basically said like, no, I don't. Even though I run hills every morning, I don't feel like doing it. But it's not a question of whether I feel like doing it. The alarm goes off, and it's like, well, I guess it's time to run hills. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I eventually became with it. Is it's not. Yes, I'm really looking forward to studying for 3 hours tonight. Of course I'm not. It's not a question of whether or not I want to study. It's, I'm going to study. Mm-hmm. And that's all there is to it, mm-hmm. and I think that's really an important ideal to develop is straying away from, this how bad do you want it videos on YouTube. Yeah. I actually hate those. They're great for like that little spark of motivation, I think for the gym or something like that. Or something like minor, mm-hmm. but I think it's a mistake to try to rely on those to get yourself going constantly because there will be days where like you're not going to feel like doing it and you have to be able to make yourself do it whether you want to or not.
Yeah, And props to the people that can do that. I personally find myself struggling with that kind of
Sure.
motivation. I found it way easier when I was on a team
Mhm.
in any
Mhm.
sports because I always had my partner or everyone else on the team to look up to
Yeah.
to push me. It's like, oh, if that guy can do 10 extra pull-ups, I can do 11. Or if that guy can beat this guy in 10 seconds, I'll try and beat him in 5.
Yes.
But I wish it was as simple as going back to Joe Rogan, alarm went off and it's like, oh, it's time to do X. I personally have fallen out of that, and I think it's very hard to get back in that situation.
Well, I agree, and I want to add a couple more things, and then I want to hear your thoughts on the things that I said, because I know you've done a ton of thinking about that kind of thing as well. But that's why I kind of think of it as for anybody who likes music or has ever played an instrument, I kind of think about it as like offbeat motivation, where I would like make myself do something when I didn't feel like it, and then I wouldn't do something when I did feel like. I'd wait till that like died down and then I would do it, to where it's kind of developing that mental association of that's like independent of whether or not I feel like doing it. It's the notion of doing it. And the last thing I wanted to add was I mentioned Jordan Peterson earlier. I listened to his podcast with Rogan, the latest one yesterday, and he said something that like it sounds stupid when you first hear it, but when you actually kind of unpack it a little bit, it's I think really meaningful. He said in reference to like little kids that play sports before they keep score, one thing that and that's fine for little kids because it's hard to really like teach them competition or like how to like, okay, well, if you don't like losing, it's hard to teach a 3-year-old, well, you just have to get better, because a 3-year-old's not going to spend time like working on their like dribbling skills and but all of a sudden when they start keeping score and there are actual winners and losers, that can be hard, because it sucks to lose. But what he said is that a lot of parents tell their kids without really understanding what it means. Is it doesn't matter if you win or lose. What matters is how you play. And like that sounds kind of cheesy on its surface, but I think this loops around nicely back to like comparing yourself to other people in social media that kind of set like fake or phony benchmarks. Well, I think it would be really cool to be able to run the Moab 240 someday. I'm not going to get out of bed and do it tomorrow. It's not a realistic goal for me to even run probably 15 miles tomorrow. So there's no sense in comparing myself to the people that can do that. I may not even be physically capable of that no matter how hard I train. I don't know, but that may be the case. So for me, what matters is, yes, in a sense, it means lowering the bar, but it means if you have enough bars to set, eventually it's accomplishing your goals in chunks. If I want to run a marathon or a triathlon or something like next year, well, then tomorrow my goal might be run 5 miles. So that's my version of what matters is how I play. I'm not going to accomplish the same thing that somebody else will. But what matters is, am I moving myself in a good direction? Am I moving myself towards a goal that I think will better myself?
It's hard.
Sorry to go on that tangent.
No.
There was a lot on my mind on that subject, and it's been very recent that I've learned all this.
You're totally right. You don't go to the gym one day and walk out looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger the next.
No. Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't do that.
Yeah.
You do feel like it. You definitely feel like it.
Well, you've mentioned Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, which are 2 of the 3 of the holy trinity of podcasts.
Yes.
So I think the third will either be Tim Ferriss or Jocko Willink. Personally, I'm going to take the opinion of Jocko Willink, who recently wrote a book called Discipline Equals Freedom. I've read a lot of this book, a whole 4.5 pages, I think, depending on the day.
What matters is how you play.
Well, and I had the discipline to read those pages. But more importantly, I think a lot of us, the 3 of us, went to a private high school where we were expected to wear a shirt and tie and be clean shaven every day, much like many in our friend group. And everyone talks about this idea of attention to detail, of staying disciplined, of staying motivated. But that's something that I think all 3 of us can really identify with, is this idea that years ago when we were in high school shape, that's something that a lot of post-grads talk about, is wanting to get their high school body back or have that high school sense of discipline. And in reality, I look at the things that made us successful, apart from an outstanding metabolism and no idea of what was coming after, life.
Before we started drinking.
Yeah, more or less. But if you think about the things that we were required to do every day, we were expected to be clean shaven.
Mm-hmm.
We were expected to go to practice. There wasn't this expectation of, I feel like taking a day off. If you took a day off from studying or practice, you were actively penalized for it, and then your performance, whether that was in the classroom or on the field or on the wrestling mat, would suffer. So much of the thinking component of high school was taken out of it. So much of the, well, should I eat healthy, or should I not drink, or should I do my homework? You didn't think about it. Like you just said with Joe Rogan Running Hills, so much of it was, this is what we are supposed to do at the time we're supposed to do it. There's penalties if you don't. Sure, you can choose not to, but it's really going to suck if you choose to not do that. And I think that's something that Jocko references with discipline equals freedom, is this idea that once you discipline yourself enough times, whether that's shaving or whether that's
making your bed
or exercising every single day, once you do that enough times, you stop thinking about it. That's how you know that you've developed a positive, healthy, reinforcive habit.
Yes.
Unfortunately, because we've graduated, and like you said, there's a lot of other responsibilities that we have once we clock out at 5 o'clock every day. There's a lot that we have to do that we don't necessarily want to, but has to get done. And once we take care of those priorities, a lot of times it's easy to say, well, I just spent the last hour and a half paying bills. No, I don't feel like working out. Or, I just spent 3 hours studying. I think I'll play some video games tonight in lieu of running hills or going to the gym. I think it's really, really easy to say that because in your mind, you've been working all day doing things that you don't want to do. In high school, it was the same thing. We had a lot of our day that was spent doing things that we didn't want to do, but we didn't really have a choice.
Yeah,
yes.
We had to do it.
We had to do it. And again, there's a baby boomer somewhere else crying for different reasons. Of course you had to do it! But when you don't think about, okay, I've got to go to practice, it's easy to be in really good shape and really good condition when you know every single day at 3 o'clock you're going to be conditioning your ass off. It's easy to get good grades when you know as soon as I get home, I have to get this homework done or I won't be in bed until 2 a.m. And then you're going to be tired for the next day. And at that point, your practice is going to suffer. Your studying is going to suffer. Anything you might have hoped to accomplish that day will suffer. Once you take a lot of that thinking out of it, really, it's easy to have success. But you can't have that success when you've got all these other external factors weighing you down, distracting you from what you're trying to accomplish or anything else that you're trying to move towards or actively work towards.
And the hard part's just trying to weave those into the formula, which, at least in my personal experience, is rather difficult. They've had their up and downs. There's been short times, even though I haven't been here too long yet, there's been times where that discipline was really strong. I was feeling good for like a week, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm back into it. Monday comes along and just resets.
Yep.
Just completely, just like, I'm gonna have a beer when I get home.
Yeah.
I don't need to do anything else. So we'll take the dog out somewhere, play Overwatch a little longer.
Yeah.
But
Well, let me ask you guys. Go ahead.
Well, and sorry, my poor father is out of town, and he's called me 3 times during this podcast, so I just had to let him know to chill out, that I'm not dead. But I really loved your idea about discipline, and the fact that you talk, because that's a huge part of turning 23. Because college is the perfect time to not really have that, because you still have, you're on your own, but you still have class, and other stuff that you can kind of meander your way through for 4 years in a lot of ways. But you've now got to be the person going through conditioning, and you have to be the coach with the whistle.
Yep.
But there's I want to take you guys through a little mental exercise that I think kind of really demonstrates the idea of a little bit over time, can make a huge difference. So let's say I were to make a financial deal. Let's imagine I'm an investor, and you guys, are coming to me for funding. And let's say we I start paying you guys on August 1st. Let's see, is August a 31-day month? 30? Yeah. Let's say September. 30 days is a little bit easier for this purpose. But basically, you have the chance to sign one of 2 deals for me. The first is I give you guys $10,000 every single day in September. Or On September 1st, I give you a penny. On September 2nd, I give you 2 pennies. On September 3rd, I give you 4 pennies. So on and so forth until the end of the month. Which deal do you sign?
The recurring interest.
Why?
But it ends at the end of the month.
It ends at the end of the month. Both deals are done on September 30th. I'm not paying you, if you pardon the pun, a penny more. After,
so I'm getting 30 pennies
no.
if it just stops accruing.
It compounds.
Yes.
Okay.
It's basically
Gotcha.
the number of pennies I give you every single day in September doubles. Every single day.
I
Yeah.
assume it's a math question.
It is a math question for those of you playing along at home to find out how much money you're getting from the penny deal. So $10,000 for 30 days is what $300,000.
Mhm.
So
Math.
to figure out how many pennies you get, just feel free to tune out for a few seconds while I talk to the few people who will actually appreciate this. It's going to be 1 plus 2 to the 29th power is how many pennies that you're going to be getting. That works out to be somewhere between $5 and $6 million.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and it's because eventually what happens is, if the amount I'm giving you doubles every single day, you get one by the time you get to like the middle of the month, like it starts doubling by like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then eventually by like $2.5 million by the end of the month. I think it's not necessarily 100% on point, but I think it does kind of illustrate really well the idea not to get like mysticized by big flashy things, because you hear $10,000 a day and you say hell yeah, I'd love $10,000 a day sounds great, but you kind of overlook, well, maybe if I go with something smaller early on, because there's nothing I'm not going to be able to do anything with that second deal for probably the first 10 plus days of the month.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with the other deal, I already have $100,000 or something.
Mm-hmm.
But you reach a point where eventually, if you're willing to wait an extra few weeks in this scenario, where that second one is worth a lot more, like a mind-boggling amount more than the first one, because you're willing to accept the smaller reward early on, and then understand that if you make do with what you have for now, eventually it's going to pay off way more than if you just kind of dove headfirst into the wrong thing.
It actually plays really well with something I've been going over in my head as of lately, because there is a career option where I'm essentially taking 3 steps down from where, like, what I'm being paid now, damn near cut it in half in this position that I'd want to be in. In the long run, though, let's say I'd have to be in this position for a year or whatever. It would ultimately grant me access to jobs that are more or less where I'd be paid now, but they would be enjoyable careers. So it's do I sit comfortably where I am in my current career path and generate something that way? Or it's like, do I take the steps down for an extended period of time to potentially, not say that's where it's a little bit different. There's the potential of getting a better career out of it, or it could be I just stepped down for a year and just got paid less.
I guarantee you that's something that a lot of people our generation are grappling with, is this idea of, do I continue along doing something that I know will make me successful, or do I do something that will eventually lead to my happiness? And I think the idea is ultimately you want to reconcile the two.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do something that you're great at, that makes you happy and makes you feel fulfilled, but also pays the bills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that ties in beautifully with this issue that you might be struggling with is, yeah, you're taking a bit of a pay cut, but ultimately it will lead long term to something that you want to work towards. But at the same time, you have house payments.
Yeah,
But at the same
exactly.
time, there's a dog and ferrets and everything else that you've got to pay for. It's a difficult issue.
It's like, do you want to love your hobbies or do you want to love your job? Because at least how it's been explained to me from my parents and from during that time, we came to the conclusion that it's like, why don't you sit with a good job and then enjoy your hobbies? It's like, you like animals, why don't you get a good paying job so that you can enjoy the time you spend with your animals? Well, it's like, well, why don't I move towards a career in that? And it's like, well, you're going to get paid shit. And it's like, oh, that made sense to me at the time. But it's like now, after being in my position for a little over a year now, it's like, do I want to continue sitting at a desk?
Well, the job that I had prior to this one was at a brewery and a distillery. And if anyone's ever met me, I really, really enjoy alcohol. I think that's something a lot of us can identify with and agree with. But an interesting thing happened. For as much as I enjoyed alcohol, the flavors, the sensations, the stumbling home at 2 a.m. with a slice of pizza, as much as I enjoyed that...
One slice?
Okay, slice and a half. Problem is, once I started this job where I was in an environment where I was constantly drinking, where I was explaining alcohol to people, where I was explaining how the flavors, how the ingredients all blended and meshed together, all of a sudden I almost stopped drinking altogether. Granted, I was working for a brewery that made a very heavy beer and a distillery that made a very strong bourbon, but when it's the middle of July, no, I don't feel like drinking. Not only do I not feel like drinking bourbon or heavy beer, I don't feel like drinking at all. I feel like a glass of water, or maybe a lemonade if I'm really treating myself.
Right.
Did you see that as a good thing?
It depends, because
I know, let's say that's your hobby.
Yeah.
Say you really enjoy it, but it's like you're saying you didn't want to do it anymore. Was it because you were content with where you were, or is it because you lost your interest in alcohol?
I'll give you another example.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy scented candles. I might be one of the few straight men in America who are proud to admit that, but I really, really enjoy scented candles.
I'm going to cut you off for just a second. I actually did go to Bath and Body Works the other day. I'm searching for crap for our new place. Yeah. So you're not alone.
Noah, this podcast has turned into a confessional.
Go on.
But at any rate, I really, really enjoy scented candles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was looking for a summer job a few years back, and I saw Yankee Candle was hiring. And you bet your ass I was thinking of throwing in an application, and I'd be surrounded by these candles, these things I enjoy all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then something made me stop and think, okay, well, I really enjoy this, but if I'm forced to do it every single day for hours at a time in an environment that I don't necessarily enjoy, how much does that detract away from something that I do love, that I do feel passionately about, whether that's candles or alcohol?
Yeah, and for me, I think I feel the same way about like something like golf.
Yeah.
You know, which you know, as you guys know, like I love golf. You know, and it's a great way for me to kind of you know get outside for like 3 or 4 hours. For somebody like me who loves to think about things way too much, you know, and loves to analyze things, it's a great way to challenge myself in a way that I don't on a day-to-day basis. But other than the fact that my body probably couldn't take the professional schedule that like a pro golfer goes through, and plus I'm not good enough anyway, it would become work. You know, and now I'd be going to the driving range because I had to every day. I'd be spending hours a day on putting, something I don't really like working on that much anyway. I'd now have to, or else I wouldn't get paid. You know, or wouldn't be able to make money, or wouldn't be able to make cuts in tournaments. All of a sudden, like, probably my favorite hobby would be something I'd be required to do to feed myself.
And you hate it.
I would hate it, probably.
So it sounds like you all fight for the position of enjoy your hobby, get a good job. At least from those two stories.
Well, okay, yes and no, because I do, even though you know, I have my good and bad days with my job, but that's because I'm still learning. I think I am blessed that I do think I found a career path that suits me very well. You know, and is something that like I can see myself staying in for a very long time. But I think a better way to put it, and I'm not saying this describes you, so I'm gonna throw that disclaimer out there before I say it. We're not in a position in our lives at the moment to be both impulsive and financially stable at the same time. And I think kind of combining that with what Connor put really well, I think, with the distillery and brewery and the Yankee Candle analogies is... what I do know of you is I think you'd be perfectly fine being around animals all the time. I don't think that would ever become like damn it, I have to go hang out with animals today.
Yeah.
I don't think that would ever be you. But I do think it's a totally different mentality when all of a sudden you have to, you know, and it's now no longer your choice. It's now no longer your escape from work. It is work. But I think this kind of goes back to what I said earlier as far as like it doesn't necessarily matter like what path you choose, but you have to pick a path. And I don't think I think it's really hard when you're 23 years old and just starting out on a path. I don't think it's necessarily possible for most people to pick a few paths. You know, because if you're on a path that involves like, you know, a house and relationships and whatever else is going on, it's hard to also choose a path that involves a career change, an uncertain future. It's just, I'm not saying it's impossible or that it's even a bad decision. I'm just saying it's much more difficult at this point in our lives than it is for somebody who's, you know, further down in their career, who maybe has more professional experience or more, you know, maybe eventually you go back to school and do something else. You know, who knows what's going to happen in the next few years of all of our lives. But it's just really difficult to dabble and mix and match things.
It feels like now if you pick that path, that's the road you're traveling.
At least for now,
yeah.
but I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah, not saying that you can't deviate down the road for a little bit, but it's like right now, it's like, well, in the sense of you were saying we can't be impulsive and financially stable. It seems like we need to lean towards financially stable until we can get our roots set so we can decide where to go.
Let me catch you right there real quick, because that's a really, really easy trap to fall into. It's really easy to justify, okay, I have to pay these bills, I'll just stick with what I'm doing right now, with the hope that eventually one day things will get better. I think if you look at a lot of people that are successful on YouTube, or a lot of people that are successful on podcasts, when they started this, or whenever they started their particular podcasting or YouTube career, that wasn't their primary source of income.
Oh, no.
That was something they were doing on the side.
Yeah, Joe did it as a hobby. He wasn't getting paid for a long time.
Yeah, they did it because it was something they enjoyed doing, and now all of a sudden people are getting sponsorships from Lisa. By the way, Lisa cut the check. But it developed into a sustainable source of income and livelihood for them. And I think that's something, you talk about this idea of you can have a decent job so that you can enjoy your hobby. That's good and well, but I think there's also somehow a way that you can find a way to monetize your hobby. I don't know what that is necessarily.
YouTube,
perhaps.
and in a way that kind of trickles away because YouTube's restrictions have kind of blown through the roof now as to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. I don't know if this is a thing still or not, but it used to be that I think all hunting videos got demonetized because they showed animals getting shot, and I know there's a plethora of other just things that have gone through, but it's hard. It is speaking from a small YouTuber standpoint. There was a small dream of being like, let's make this the hobby. Let's make this that side thing that makes maybe not a lot of revenue, but enough where it's like I could take my girlfriend out on the weekend for lunch or something like that. You're one in a billion people on YouTube. There is a million people like me. There's a million people not like me. And the odds of having someone type in what happens after college and our faces popping up is 1 in a million. Getting your audience,
probably for the best, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Well, we could promote this bad boy, and
well, that's true. Like, we could take this and this could be shared with everyone on our social media, people like friends, neighbors, to be like, oh yeah, I do this side thing, and realistically, odds are they might not click on it. If they're a good friend, they'll be like, yeah, I'll click on it and give you a listen. But the majority of people that this gets advertised to, they go, huh, and just scroll, and they keep on scrolling. So, and I think me and you have talked about this before in the past, consistency is key, at least when it comes to YouTube. You need to have some sort of thing coming out it doesn't have to be frequently, but it has to be consistent. It's like, if I'm going to post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you got to post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because as soon as you break that chain, people are like, oh, you broke it. I wonder if something's wrong. Or it's like, I got to find a new Friday guy. I got to find my new sitting at work listening to something guy.
Sure.
I'm sorry, one more thing. And that being said, you have to be, whatever it is on YouTube, it's got to be interesting. Like, I do a lot of games on the side besides this podcast. There's a billion people that do games. If I did, I don't know, rhino breeding, you better believe there'd be more views on that.
Well,
funny you should mention that. That brings us into our next topic.
Well, we do all three have off work today.
I mean, we can go to the zoo.
I'm going to stop now before I become legally liable. But,
take us to the GoPro.
But talking about the zoo, I think that's...
Wait, hang on a second. I just got the mental image of bringing in a rhino into a casting couch situation with our setup. And
So is this your first time?
Yeah, right. So tell me, how long ago did that horn grow in?
Yeah. Are you feeling horny today?
Yeah.
I'm going to stop now before I get in trouble.
Right.
Point being,
Oh shit.
I think Noah Goes to the Zoo could be a perfectly viable YouTube series, or at least a mini-series. So
True.
go to the zoo, and instead of going through the entirety of the zoo, just spend 10 or 15 minutes focusing on the Arctic exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
Polar bears are pretty cool, and you could say, hey, because of global warming, we're not going to see too many of these for much longer.
Jesus.
That gives you a bit of nuance, but
You're right. There just definitely needs to be some sort of variety in the content. Something that's going to catch people's eyes. Realistically, if I put on a stream of me playing a video game, there's a million people doing it better than me that are doing commentary way better than me.
Yeah, but how many of them pay to promote it?
I don't know if they pay to promote it. I think people are paying them to play it.
Not at first.
Not at first. That's very true. Like Game Grumps, they started out as a hobby.
Yeah.
It was just two guys being like, let's fucking play video games and talk. And that
Yeah.
that grew into a company, which evolved into a touring company. I think there's 3 bands now, and they also make video games, and I think they're doing their own cartoon show now. Like, it's blown up into a company.
Yeah.
But that started out as just dudes playing on a video game. But that in itself is a 1 in a million chance.
Well, and Amazon started out as a book company, you know, and
Mhm.
it's been largely discussed that Jeff Bezos, when they were getting started out, basically he wanted to get good at one thing because, you know, if you could become a reliable like online bookstore essentially, like that kind of develops trust with the brand, and then all of a sudden, the second they branch out into like something else minor, like people trust it, you know, when they started doing like electronic device. I think that was their next move, was like the electronic handheld, like the Kindle, the whatever the more iPad-y version of the Kindle was, that, you know, the Kindle Fire.
Or something, yeah.
Is that what it was? That was yeah, right? It kind of, you know, let them branch from like, you know, ordering books to, you know, now you don't have to order books. You can now, on this tablet device, you can now buy and read whatever books you want. And then that's got them in the tech and electronics department, and now they can kind of Now, I have an Amazon Fire TV at home. Do you think like 10 plus years ago, when they said like, you know, when Amazon was still delivering books, did you ever think that like you'd be using it to watch internet TV like wirelessly someday? No. Like, so it's and you know, if you know who Gary Vaynerchuk is, Gary V. One thing that he's always kind of been an advocate of is like triple down on your strengths. You know, get really good at one thing, and then once you kind of mastered that one thing, then you can kind of, that gives you a solid foundation to branch out into other things from that. And I don't think that's any different from a lot of where those big YouTubers or where any big brand started. You know, and
definitely. Well, it's starting. It kind of goes back to the motivation.
Yeah,
you got to start it, and you got to keep doing it. Like you were saying, the Noah Goes to the Zoo spinoff thing. You got to pick up that camera, and you got to go to the zoo. You got to be comfortable walking around with the camera around other people in the zoo, and then you got to do that. Let's say it's like a bi-weekly thing. Just twice a week you need to go to the zoo and give it a try. And that's broken before in the past, where I've tried to do, I don't know, where I'm just going to go off on a tangent, but discipline. We're back at discipline. You got to be disciplined in whatever it is you're trying to do, especially when it comes to YouTube.
Well, how many people have started blogs that started out nice and strong and then crashed and burned the second they realize, oh, I've got to go renew my car insurance today, or I've got to take care of this issue.
Well, and there are also plenty of people who have started a hobby specifically to write a blog about that hobby.
Yeah,
you know, so I think motivation is important, but your motivation also needs to be placed in the right, you know, in the right spot.
Yeah.
You know, like how many people do you know that have like started working out or started a certain diet just so they can like, you know, broadcast it on Instagram or other, you know, on a blog or something like that.
Do you think they use that as a motivation though?
No, I don't.
Do you think like putting it out, seeing let's say for example, it's working out. Do you think seeing, let's say they post a video or a clip of them trying to get into the gym, do you think they use that as a sense of
accountability?
Yeah, being like, I'm posting this picture. I have to post this picture. I have to work out so I can post it.
I think maybe some people do. I don't think most people who do that or are doing that for that reason. You know, I think maybe the first time. Maybe this is like, oh, well, you know, I can share this journey with everybody else, and like this will be what's keeping me going. But I think there are studies that show a few different things. The first study that I want that's coming to mind is that basically showed that like discussing a goal and sharing a goal that you're pursuing with other people gives you the same like chemical response in your brain as actually achieving it.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, by broadcasting your goal and by you know, talking about like, oh, you know, like this time next year, you know, I'm going to be really fit and in shape. Talking about that gives you the same release in your brain as actually achieving it. Maybe not on the same level, but
Mm-hmm.
like it actually drops motivation by doing something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the other one is the one that everybody is more familiar with. That basically, you know, talks about how like getting likes and shares on social media is, you know, basically the same thing as it. Eventually you get addicted to it in the same way you get addicted to any other drug.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I think a lot of people that are already addicted to social media in some way, shape, or form, I think they may not have the best motivation when they get into these other endeavors. I don't think their heart's necessarily in the place of like, you know, oh, this will be what's finally motivating me to see this through to the end. I think it's like, this is, you know, how else am I going to get my you know, my dopamine kick?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're becoming forced to do your hobbies, and the next thing you know, you're working at Yankee Candle. It's a horrible, vicious cycle that there's no escape from. But anyways, just because I know we are going on an hour long, I was thinking one last segment that people might benefit from if they've made it this far in the podcast might be discussing some of the rituals or some of the daily things that we do or the things that we think make us successful. I was thinking we could go around, list a few, and wrap it up. Just
you want to kick it off?
Sure. Something I've started doing recently is making my bed, because I've spent the last 23 years of my life actively working every day to not make my bed. This comes after the Admiral McRaven speech from the University of Texas, where he talks about, if you want to change the world, make your bed. Well, Admiral McRaven, I've made my bed every day for the last 2 months, and I'm still not a Navy SEAL, so really balls in your court.
well, but you're still in that phase where you're only getting a few pennies a day.
That's exactly. The other thing that I do every week is what I call my Sunday night shave. This stems from something I did in high school where we were expected to be clean shaven. I noticed that my facial hair grows at the perfect length so that by the time Friday and Saturday rolls around, it looks like I've got a really nice scruff, but it was still acceptable enough for me to get away with it at school. As a result, every Sunday night ever since, I've shaved every single Sunday night, and it acts as a really nice centering act, or a ritualistic act that lets me think about what's coming up the week ahead. Why am I shaving? Why am I going through these motions? And what am I hoping to gain from them? In my opinion, it makes me feel calmer, and it makes me feel more centered, and it gives me this frankly false sense of security that going into Monday morning, I'll at least have a fresh shaven face, I'll feel clean, I'll feel prepared, ready to take on whatever Monday throws my way.
It's mental preparation.
Yeah.
And Monday inevitably has its way, but that's neither here nor there. But those are two things that I enjoy doing. I don't know what you guys,
Anthony?
For me, as far as like ritualistic stuff, it's not so much about what I enjoy, you know, because there are, for me it's, I need to get a little better with, like, I don't have many hobbies. I do golf, but I don't think like golf can be it for any person. So I need to kind of branch out with that a little more. But what I do, like, for me, I get enjoyment out of accomplishing things, not so much in the sense of like accomplishment in and of itself. It's more so like, you know, I kind of have an idea where like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could do this? You know, let's say it's a fitness goal, or let's say it's like, you know, studying for one of my exams or something like that. It's that sense of like, oh, I think it'll be really cool, you know, once I learn how to do this, or once I'm strong enough or flexible enough or in good enough shape to do this. So it's, I'm going to share because I talked to my roommate Matt yesterday, that I've talked to you guys a decent amount, and I've accidentally name dropped on this podcast in the past, but he put it perfectly when he, I think this is great for anybody listening and great for you guys to hear. He said, never put an ordinary amount of effort into accomplishing something extraordinary. And for me, I've really kind of learned to relish, like, I don't necessarily enjoy working out every single day just because it's kind of mundane at this point. I don't necessarily enjoy sitting down at the end of a full work day to have to learn math, on a high level. I don't necessarily enjoy any of that in and of itself, but I absolutely love where it takes me eventually, and the things that and the joy that it's given after the fact, months down the road. So for me, it's I guess just been about, self-improvement and picking a path that I want to journey down.
And I've been trying to figure out something while y'all were talking, because I definitely have been struggling with this recently, trying to find that something to give me the kick in the ass that I need. This is kind of one of the ones where it started up and dropped out, and I'm trying to get myself to get back into it again. Started working out again, which was a great feeling, but that's not I guess that's not the pushing thing that I'm trying to talk about. After the workout, I make a point to take an ice cold shower. I don't turn any heat on or anything like that. I make a point to walk into that shower and not flinch when I walk into the cold water. And it was on a Joe Rogan podcast. I can't remember who exactly said that. It's like, you need to push against that grain. It's like, shit's going to be tough, but it's like, he said, if you can walk into a cold shower and not flinch, there's going to be other scary things in life that, like, for example, no one wants to step into a cold water because it's fucking cold. But when you're introduced to a situation where you don't want to do it, it's going to be hard to do it, you're scared of it, whatever, you could think back to that cold shower. It's like, you can walk into a cold shower, or you've faced situations where you've been uncomfortable before, and having the ability to not flinch and dive head on into those things could help me sometime down the road. So, cold showers. That's what I got.
Well, I think that all ties together really well, though. Again, unfortunately, I think there's some baby boomer,
Somewhere.
greatest generation or somewhere who goes, of course you shave every day, of course you drink black coffee every day, of course you take a cold shower every day. All these things that our parents and our grandparents have been doing for hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why. Yeah. I think so much of our generation has become dependent on finding the easier way to get something done, or finding the quicker way to get something done, that eventually we forget why we're doing it in the first place, which is to feel better, to enjoy or experience more success in what it is we're trying to do, or eventually just realizing, hey, this is the right way to do whatever.
Remember, kids, it's not about whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. Noah, thanks a bunch for having us.
Yeah, thanks again.
No problem, guys, and you'll better believe we'll have you on here sometime again soon. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.
Happy Independence Day.
Beautiful, guys.
Cheers.
That was fun.
Really dope.